The Egghead Island arc, Vegapunk. The arc that everyone knew would be happening in some capacity, and yet, much like the hilariously surprising yet completely logical Duval reveal, no one saw coming. Will this be a prelude to a bigger, or should I say more gigantic arc a la Zoro? And in what ways will our various Straw Hats stand out? Hello humans of the world, I'm Dawn of the World, and I'm still next to my bed here. Welcome aboard. I've been meaning to share these thoughts for a number of weeks, and at first I was just going to focus on Franky and Sanji with maybe a touch of Chopper and Nami. However, with every week I put this off, yet another Straw Hat was added to the concoction, and now they're basically all there. Dive into my subscribe button while you're at it, and ding on that notification bell while you're here. Let's dive in. Starting with the OG crew member that everybody knew would be important this arc, but we haven't seen fully realized just yet, and that's Franky. From cola to beams to booty shorts, Franky was always going to be important during any kind of Vegapunk arc. I mean, he did spend an entire 2 years on Vegapunk's home island where he studied in his lab, essentially learning directly/indirectly from him. And now we're on Egghead Island and we've seen some of Vegapunk's work. We can see the essence of inspiration that comes through in things like the Franky Shogun and like Franky's body himself, which is so interesting because Vegapunk was in turn inspired by the technology of the ancient kingdom. So really, a lot of Franky's current inventions are reminiscent of things, artifacts, technologies that could have been found during the Void Century in the ancient kingdom, and that's so fascinating. So Vegapunk is a key point of inspiration for Franky, though it's not clear where Franky first heard about Vegapunk to begin with. Possibly from Tom, but maybe since even before that, when he was a mere Franklet on his parents' ship. But there's more to it than just that as well. I think it's really interesting that both Franky and Vegapunk have star motifs going on. Vegapunk has it literally in his name, the fact that his original body is referred to as the stellar body, and having a star in his symbol, much like the star decals and tattoos Franky has had since his introduction. Also, just a few chapters back when Luffy and his group encountered the food machine with Atlas, there are hundreds of combinations that could have come out of that thing, but the first thing that was deposited, complete with a Vegapunk star stamp packaging, was a burger, fries, and a cola. Literally the most Franky meal to ever exist, to the point where Oda has stated it as Franky's favourite meal in an SBS. And he then chose, of all possible meals, for that to be the one that came out. Franky and Vegapunk were even technically introduced in the same saga, though at opposite ends of it, with Franky's introduction at the start of Water 7 and Kobe telling Luffy about the amazing marine scientist Vegapunk during the post-Enies Lobby arc. I think it's possible that Franky has some kind of ties to Vegapunk that we're not aware of yet, but I don't think Vegapunk is his father. I saw someone actually suggest that Vegapunk might be Franky's grandfather, but there's actually only a 29-year age gap between the pair, so probably not. Since I am dabbling in the family discussion area though, yes, the whole thing with Franky's mysterious deadbeat pirate parents could be inconsequential, but particularly in recent years, I feel that Oda leaves very few stones unturned. I mean, Oda could have easily written Franky's parents out of the story in a different way, but no, they were specifically pirates who abandoned him in Water 7 for being a nuisance. It could easily be inconsequential, but it sounds kind of fishy to me. I mean, like, why make them pirates and imply that they're still out there on the ocean somewhere? Oda also gave Franky a very questionable birth name, Cutty Flam. And I understand that this served the function of Cutty Flam dying and then reassuming a new identity of a cyborg Franky, but the fact that there was and still is a family name, Cutty, likely named for Cutty Sark, an historic ship, to me makes it seem a bit more likely that we actually could encounter other characters who have that family name somewhere in the future, and possibly even the near future, since the series isn't meant to have a lot left. But wait, there's more Franky things. Another important figure in this arc is Kuma, who, like Franky, is a cyborg, and all cyborgs know each other. Only kidding, but these two do. And out of all the Straw Hats, I would say that Franky would be among those with whom Kuma has had the more plot-oriented interactions. I mean, Kuma has been important to the plot for basically all of them, but Franky specifically was the first to return to the Sunny at Sabaody Archipelago, where Kuma had been guarding the Sunny for 2 years, which was his last request to Vegapunk. And Franky was then the one who relayed this information to the rest of of the crew. And now, despite all of these points, we have yet to see any payoff to Franky's prominence in this arc just yet. He's been a little bit more proactive than some of the others, I guess, in asking questions, but that in itself makes sense because they're speaking to Vegapunk here, and that's a whole thing. But if his character is to gain more focus in this arc, at this point we're yet to see it, but I reckon that it's on the horizon. So at this point, we're not too many chapters into what I believe is being known as the Egghead Island arc, the Vegapunk arc, the what have you, the so many simpable ladies arc, including Law. That seems to be turning almost everyone into some variation of Sanji, the biggest simp of all. And speaking of Sanji, it's no secret that some arcs focus on certain characters more than other characters. Hence this video probably talks more about Franky than it does about anyone else, because that's where my expectations are. I suppose if there's one thing that people weren't expecting after the whole Sanji arc, that was Whole Cake Island, it was another Sanji arc. I remember that there were some people who were kind of shocked during Sanji's fight with Queen when Sanji's body started changing. His eyebrow shifted sides and he was afraid he was going to lose himself the way that his brothers had done. I guess there's some people who after Whole Cake Island were like, yeah, and that's a wrap on Sanji, bring it in fellas, thinking that because One Piece is in its closing arc and we've just been inundated with a wave of Sanji, that his character arc was now basically over. But no one's character arc is over until the story is over. And what Oda did with Sanji's character during Onigashima was really compelling. On one hand, we see that his character has definitely grown in a sense that he's able to ask other people for help, which is really huge, that person being Robin. That's worth a whole video in and of itself. But also we had this other subplot involving lineage factor gouged open, with Sanji's body physically changing. Like, remember the whole eyebrow thing? And what happened in that fight between Sanji and Queen? That needs to be followed up. And who better to ask about all the madness than the source of all the madness, that being Vegapunk. Judge was after all a part of Mads and worked very closely with Vegapunk when studying lineage factor, allowing him to mess up his children so. Which in itself raises questions for me about Vegapunk, because why the hell you gotta keep working with these shitty toilet people, my dude? Should have just stayed in Dragon's posse, but no. I digress, there are going to be plot relevant reasons for the choices that Vegapunk has made, and as a reader I respect that. Also, as people have pointed out, Egghead Island bears an aesthetic resemblance to the world in which the comic strip Sora, Warrior of the Sea takes place, of which Germa are the antagonists. But you know who doesn't generally share this aesthetic? Chopper. That's a segue. There's not a huge amount to say here other than the fact that Chopper is a doctor and could very likely benefit from some of Vegapunk's innovations. It was even confirmed in the other chapter that Vegapunk has amassed knowledge in all fields, including the medical. Chopper does get sidelined somewhat, but I feel like the fact that he is off with Luffy and Jinbei is setting him up for a more prominent role than he might have otherwise. Don't mind me just adding this in a while later while editing. After having read chapter 1069, it seems that awakened Zoans are going to have a bit more of a focus from here on out, as well as devil fruits in general. This has me asking questions about Chopper and his potential for an awakening, since while Monster Chopper seems to be the base for an awakening, it doesn't seem to me to be a true Zoan awakening, since we see in the case of Lucci, even the stock standard Zoan devil fruits that aren't mythical or otherwise seem to gain an ethereal quality about them upon unlocking awakening. We can see this in the way that Lucci's fur doesn't seem to fully obey the laws of gravity, and he has a similar cloudy scarf thing to what Luffy has in his awakened form, making me think that this cloudy scarf thing is a hallmark of awakened Zoan types. Chopper has never had List look going for him in his monster form, and has only ever been able to stimulate this form through taking his rumble balls, leading me to believe that a true Chopper awakening is something we have yet to see. While I'm here, I'll also briefly talk about Nami. Nami is a character who I thought could have more significance when this arc first started, and could still yet. This was majorly because when we first got to Egghead, well, we're arriving on an island with a very tropical climate, despite being surrounded by this icy stormy sea that would suggest a winter island. And on top of this, Egghead Island is, well, an egg. So putting 2 and 2 together, there's the possibility that Egghead Island could just be one big weather egg. And of course, Nami has all kinds of weather things going on, and she has from the very start. Zoro notes her ability to predict the weather before the two of them even ever meet. Vivi notes something's up way back before Drum Island. Something is up with Nami, and I don't think it's going to be followed up just in this arc, but it's definitely worth being reminded of these things going forward into the last leg of the story. And I should really do a Nami video, or 2 or 12 at some point. It's what she deserves. On the topic of unclear backgrounds and true abilities that we've spent most of the story in the dark about, Luffy. Luffy is a more recent addition to this list, as is everybody else going forward. This is, of course, because, oh hey there daddy is on the scene. Not only that, but we recently found found out that Vegapunk was a part of Luffy's dad's posse with Kuma and Ivankov. But regardless of Vegapunk having opted to go with the world government for funding, and maybe whatever other reason, he's still on speaking terms with Dragon. Dragon even still seems to have a degree of mindfulness towards his former friend of sorts, telling him to not talk like that when Vegapunk supposes he'll die soon. So what's that so far? Vegapunk is like the role model for one Straw Hat and has connections with two of the other's fathers. There's also the little detail that Lilith desires an eternal son. By the way, how do you guys say Lilith? I was publicly shamed recently on a video for my pronunciation. Anyway, Lilith wants an eternal son, and well, the thing with Luffy is that he is a sunny boy. Lilith desires an eternal son. Luffy is Dragon's son. Has anyone seen Jinbei's son? Seraphim Jinbei was someone I was expecting to see since we saw Hancock and Mihawk Seraphims, and it was interesting that the non-Jinbei party crossed paths with him, because I really wonder how the real Jinbei would have reacted to seeing such a clone of himself. This is Jinbei's first full arc as a Straw Hat pirate, so I'm expecting him to do some things. On the topic of Seraphims though, they've been basically created to be living weapons. But hear me out. Do Seraphims have feelings? Or do they at least have the capacity to have feelings and to make their own decisions? Like, surely they're capable of things other than destruction, it's just that the world government is using them to destruct. And this takes me back to one of my favourite quotes in the series, and it is a Franky quote. Yes, he is overflowing into his crewmate sections now. And it's the quote that no matter what weapon you hold, it's never a crime to just exist, or something to that effect. So of course I hear this quote now and I think of not only the Seraphims, but a certain other group that I've already mentioned in this video, and that would be the Vinsmocks. Franky learnt this lesson off his mentor Tom when it came to ships, that the ship itself couldn't be good or evil, and that the person who made it should just be proud of their creation. The Vinsmock brothers, the Seraphims, these are all beings that were created and that I don't think are innately evil, but they have been used for antagonistic purposes by Judge, by the world government. Even if they are capable of being used for such things, I don't think that they're evil at their core. And I think that we might get to see that in some way someday. Some semblance of self-awareness or emotion, especially if Vegapunk were to step in and somehow reverse what damage may have been done. And going back to that quote, the person who Franky said that to back in the day was Robin. And when I was first writing the script for what became this video, Robin actually wasn't included. And that's because chapter 1065 hadn't dropped yet at that point. And boy, was that a game changer. Because the past is the future and it's the void century and I love that. It plays so perfectly into the themes of duality, into two sides of the same coin that One Piece has always had going on. The future and the past really are two sides of the same coin here. And this gives so much more substance to so many other things throughout the series. Like in Enna's lobby where Franky and Robin are captured as the ones capable of awakening the ancient weapon Pluton. She represents the past and he represents the future, but they're one and the same. It's so good. Anyway, on top of that, hello? O'Hara is relevant? Robin went from being one of the last Straw Hats I'd expect to have any prominence on Egghead Island to being the one who has had the most to date. Good on her. But of course, Vegapunk's intellect and nerdiness isn't confined to the realms of STEM alone, like I assumed. He values and wants to pursue every school of thought and knowledge, which makes so much more sense when you think about it. So of course, O'Hara, the Tree of Knowledge, Professor Clother, these are all things that he admired in such high regard. And O'Hara's knowledge and learnings live on in Vegapunk, since a person, or in this case knowledge, only truly dies when they're forgotten. And Vegapunk sailed to Elbaf, where O'Hara's saved library is now kept, for the purpose of reading every single one of their books and continuing their studies. Oh, and Saul's alive, and he seems to be an Elbaf as well. So this is shaping up to be just as much a Robin arc as it was going to be a Franky arc. Franky, my man, come on, we've got to get your plot moving. So, did someone say Elbaf? We can't have Elbaf without Elbaf Usopp. And if Egghead Island is going to be a relatively short pit stop before we reach the main Norse giant-inspired event, it's pretty safe to say that my guy Usopp is going to play a pretty important role before too long. The Elbaf arc is the longest anticipated arc in the series after Laugh Tale, and let me tell you, everyone and their dad is going to be there, and Usopp is going to be an important dude that arc. All signs point to him having a pretty significant role. However, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. We're not in Elbaf yet. We still might not be for a while, though the series isn't going to be going for that much longer, so Regardless, it's closer than ever before. In the interim, Usopp, much like yet to a lesser degree than Franky, could learn a lot at Egghead Island and benefit from upgrades. I heard someone on the internet saying that Usopp might have his slingshot Black Kabuto eat a devil fruit. And I actually love this idea. I think it'd be really neat, especially when you consider that the first time we ever saw an inanimate object that had eaten a devil fruit, it was being used in a battle as an opponent to Usopp and Chopper. And we've learned since then that Vegapunk is the one who has devised the method of feeding a devil fruit to an inanimate object, so it's pretty possible during this arc we will see that in action. And hey, why not have Black Kabuto become a fruit user? Just avoid dropping it in the water or you're really gonna have to dive down after it. Side note, I actually wrote a fanfiction over 10 years ago where a ship had eaten a devil fruit of a certain animal. So while the ship was now functionally useless to fulfill the purpose for which it had originally been intended, it had discovered a second life as a sort of land taxi and would traverse people from one end of the island to the other in its hybrid form. So the figurehead was literally the head of the animal, the body was the ship, and then it had the legs going on, and I'm still very proud of it to this day, and I hope that one day Oda creates a canonical case of it. Anyway, another thing that I hope Oda makes canon is the basically fanfiction of the theory that I wrote about Brook's pre-pirate past, but it has a lot of legitimacy. So on the scene now in this arc, we have the CP0. Brook is the only member of the Straw Hats who hasn't fought a person who is or was associated with Cypherpole. So we might get to see that this arc. Something else I wanted to point out actually is another thing from Onigashima. Robin and Brook, the two crew members from West Blue, were also the two who fought Black Maria, who creates illusions of the past. Now that we've had it revealed that Ohara is relevant again, I think it's kind of safe to say that having Black Maria dig up figures from Robin's past relatively recently has functioned as a literary refresher. This was Oda's way of saying, hey, remember Robin's past? Yeah, you remember it, right? Oh, no reason. In order to prepare us for the upcoming reveal regarding Saul and Ohara. And what's more is that Brook saw figures from his past as well. This wasn't elaborated on much in the manga, likely because Oda was chased for time, many moving pieces and whatnot, but apparently the episode of the anime that's coming out this Sunday, upon this recording at least, it would have already have come out by the time this is released, the next episode will be elaborating on how Black Maria's powers affected Brook. And coming out of the Ohara reveal and feeling how I feel about West Blue, I thought, how interesting. What if Oda is making sure that Brook's Black Maria triggered flashback is being fleshed out more in the anime? Because like Ohara, Brook's past is going to be relevant again soon. Keep in mind that Ohara and Brook's mysterious home kingdom are both in the same part of the ocean, that being West Blue. Because as far as storytelling goes, have Black Maria dredge up both Robin and Brook's backstories feels a little pointless, unless both of those backstories become relevant in the near future, which one of them already has. In which case, Black Maria's abilities have served the purpose of reminding the audience as to what happened in Robin and Brook's respective backstories, and keeping those backstories relatively fresh on the mind for when they become relevant again. Right now though, Brook isn't being chased by the ghosts of his past, he's having tea with Zoro. Hey, remember in Onigashima when that weird thing happened to Zoro and people thought it was Brook? Why'd you think it was Brook? But what was that? And are we going to find out? Zoro has taken a little bit of a backseat this arc, however, he has been proactive. Don't forget, chapters ago, he wanted to ask Vegapunk a thing. And we haven't found out what that thing is just yet, but I have heard cases made that it has something to do with the Smile victims in Wano. There is, of course, the possibility that it could be something else. Zoro left us high and dry with a whole bunch of questions in the last arc. Who's this other bone man? Who's your daddy? How'd you scale Enma down from Odin's big 12'6" man size to your little 6'1"? Oh shit, he's not even that tall. What's certain though is that Zoro had his toughest fight ever against King in Onigashima. He won, but he was considerably wrecked. In fact, the last time he was that wrecked, Kuma was involved. This was, of course, the impactful nothing happened scene, which is aptly named since something did, in fact, happen. I guess I bring up this scene due to Kuma's involvement, since Kuma is important again this arc, and I guess it's making me think. To this day, Luffy still still doesn't know that Zoro took all of his pain that time. And in all honesty, that is one of the few stones that Oda may well leave unturned. Luffy will likely never find out, and that's fine. But if, for what reason the story requires it, Luffy would need to find out in some way. And if that's the case, could that moment be on the way? I'm personally leaning towards Luffy not finding out, but I could be won over since I love me some drama. What do you guys reckon? At the end of the day, we're at the end of the day. We're in the final saga, everyone's going to be picking up the pace. Everyone's going to be important and relevant, just like this other video here, which you should definitely watch. I'm Dawn of the World, and I will see you next time. Later, guys.